Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. Truly is. So, before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. So we are True Crime at Christmas Time, day 13. And today we're talking Bruce McArthur. Okay, so Bruce McArthur was born Thomas Daniel Bruce McArthur on October 8th, 1951 in Lindsay, Ontario, Canada. He was raised on a farm in Argyll with his sister and his parents, Islay and Malcolm. His parents fostered troubled children, so growing up, it wasn't uncommon for Bruce to have anywhere from 6 to 10 troubled youth living with him at any given time. Which is I guess is kind of commendable on his parents' part, right? I don't know if I could do that. Growing up, McArthur attended a one-room schoolhouse, and classmates of his would describe him as a teacher's pet that was always trying to get others in trouble. His mother was a devout Irish Catholic, and his father was a devout Scottish Presbyterian. This would actually cause a lot of fights in their marriage, and McArthur would always take his mom's side. Growing up, though, growing up, he strongly believed that his father knew that he was gay and he had trouble accepting it. And for this reason, his father was always mean to him. He was always treated differently. In high school, McArthur met and started dating a classmate named Janice Campbell. The two graduated in 1970 and got married a few years later at the age of 23. After graduation, McArthur began working as a buyer's assistant at Eaton's department stores. During this time, the gay village was forming on Yonge Street, which was a few blocks north of where McArthur was working at the time. But he would end up leaving that job at the department store in 1978 to become a traveling salesman for McGregor Socks. So he would go to various department stores and he would try to get them to sell his products in their stores, or the company's products in their stores. Then in the mid-1970s, Bruce's father was diagnosed with a brain tumor and sent to a nursing home. So while dad is in a nursing home, mom starts seeing another man. This pisses Bruce off a great deal, and as a result of this, he grows extremely close to his father. Mom would end up passing away in 1978 from cancer, and dad followed closely behind, passing in 1981. In 1979, Bruce and Janice moved into a new home in Oshawa. They had their first child there, a little girl that they named Melanie, in 1981. In 1986, the couple welcomed their second child, a little boy that they named Todd. And by all accounts, the McArthurs seemed to be your all-American family. Then in the early 1990s, McArthur began having extramarital affairs with men. And I feel like we could have seen this coming, because you can only suppress those types of feelings for so long before they creep back up again. Which is why, I don't know, whatever. I get so annoyed when people feel like they can, like, beat the gay out of somebody. No, that's not how it works. I mean, I don't know, but I know that that's not how it works, from what I've heard. More than a year into these affairs, Bruce decided to come clean to Janice about everything. And I can't imagine what that poor woman was feeling at the time. I truly can't. So Bruce and Janice decided to continue living together, partially because of the bills and partially because of the children. Then, sometime after 1993, MacArthur lost his job and the couple's financial issues just spiraled from there. On top of Bruce losing his job, the couple had legal fees to pay because their son Todd decided that it would be a good idea to call and harass random women that he didn't know. So in 1997, the couple was forced to mortgage their home. And then also in 1997, Bruce decided to move out of the home and find a place in Toronto. The reason for this is because Oshawa didn't have a gay community in it. So he ended up finding a place on Don Mills Road and began a 4-year relationship with another man. Then in 1999, the couple declared bankruptcy. So during this time, Bruce and Janice's divorce is finalized. He's trying to find work as a landscaper, and he begins seeing a psychiatrist who prescribes him the antidepressant Prozac. October 31st, 2001. Model and actor Mark Henderson invited Bruce MacArthur into his apartment to see his Halloween costume. At some point, MacArthur hits Henderson over the head with an iron pipe. Henderson lost consciousness, and when he awoke, he was brought to St. Michael's Hospital. He required several stitches in his head and fingers, along with 6 weeks of physiotherapy. After the attack, MacArthur turned himself in, but claimed he didn't remember the incident or the reasonings behind why he struck the model. So he pled guilty to assault with a weapon and causing bodily harm. On April 11th, 2003, MacArthur was sentenced to 2 years, along with a further charge for carrying a concealed weapon. Great. No. You would think, right? No. And this seems to be a pattern with MacArthur, which is probably why these things went on as long as they did. Somehow, MacArthur was able to avoid jail time altogether by spending the first year of his sentence on house arrest, followed by 6 months of a curfew and 3 years of probation. Really? Really? For clocking someone in the head with a metal pipe? Really? He was also barred from visiting Toronto's gay district, church, and Wellesley during his probation, except for work and doctor's appointments. He was also ordered to stay at least 33 feet away from the victim's home and work. He was not allowed to hang out with male sex workers, and he could not own a firearm for 10 years. He was not allowed to purchase or consume drugs other than those that were prescribed to him by a doctor, and he was forced to submit his DNA into a database. In 2014, MacArthur was granted a record suspension on his conviction. Basically, this means that his record was expunged, and that nothing showed up on criminal background checks. The only documents that exist from the Halloween incident are the transcripts of the guilty plea, the sentence hearing, the psychiatric report, and the pre-sentencing report, pictures of the weapon, and pictures of the victim's injuries. Why? Is there a reason that you did that? You're gonna, like... ridiculous. MacArthur would eventually become a self-employed landscaper. A colleague that worked on 3 of MacArthur's projects referred to him as more of a gardener working out of a van. Regardless, it doesn't matter. MacArthur was able to build a loyal clientele of mainly older, wealthy women. During the off-season, MacArthur would play Santa Claus for the children in the Agincourt Mall and make floral gifts for charities. I'm so sorry if your kid has a picture with him. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. In 2014, the MacArthur son Todd went to court for making the multiple obscene phone calls to unknown women. He was sentenced to 14 months in prison, and he was later released on bail in order to stay with his father in his father's apartment and to work for his father's landscaping business. Okay, so let's talk victims. 40-year-old Skandaraj Skanda Navartnam was a refugee from Sri Lanka and didn't have any family members in Canada. He was last seen on September 6, 2010, leaving a bar named Zippers with an unknown male. After he was reported missing, it came out that he had been in a relationship with Bruce MacArthur since 1999. At the time of his disappearance, he was still involved with MacArthur, and he also worked for his landscaping company. 42-year-old Abdulbasir Faizi was an immigrant from Afghanistan. You're going to notice this. Sorry. You're going to notice this pattern. They are mostly all immigrants. And there's a reason for this, and we'll talk about it. Okay. 42-year-old Abdulbasir Faizi was an immigrant from Afghanistan. And while he was living in Iran, he was warned by a childhood friend to be careful about coming out as gay. He was last seen on December 28th, 2010 at the Black Eagle Bar and the Steamworks Bathhouse. 58-year-old Majid Kaihan was an immigrant from Afghanistan. He fled to Canada with his wife and children in the late 80s. He divorced his wife in 2002 and had not come out to his entire family. He was last seen on October 18, 2012 in the Gay Village. He knew MacArthur from hanging out at the Black Eagle with him, and he had romantically pursued him in the past. 50-year-old Sarush Mahmoudi was a refugee from Iran and didn't have any family in Canada until he met his wife. He was last seen on August 15, 2015, near his home. 49-year-old Andrew Kinsman was known as a stable and responsible man. He was the superintendent of his building and volunteered in the community. He had known MacArthur for at least a decade from being a bartender at the Black Eagle, and he had even worked on one of MacArthur's landscaping projects with him in 2011. 44-year-old Celine Eason came from Turkey to Canada to be with a man that he met. He was last seen on April 14, 2017. Police say he was a drifter with no known address, while friends say that he was a person stuck in an extremely unhealthy relationship, and because of this, he would basically couch surf. 43-year-old Dean Liswick was a homeless man that usually stayed at Toronto's shelter system. He was previously a sex worker, but before he went missing on April 21st, 2016, he was trying to turn his life around and get a respectable job that he could be proud of. "37-year-old Karushna Kanagaratham was a refugee from Sri Lanka. He was last seen July 6, 2016. He lost contact with his family in August of 2015 and was never reported missing. In 2012, police in Switzerland get a tip from an informant and pass this information on to the Toronto police. As crazy as that sounds. Okay, so this informant claims that he was in an online cannibalism chat room named Zombian Meat, as in MEAT, meat. He claims that he was chatting with a man that went by the name John Jacob. And he told this informant that he had met, killed, and eaten a gay man in Toronto. When the informant researched the information, he discovered the investigation of Skanda Naratham was going on, and he informed the police in Switzerland. Okay. So, because this informant actually helped catch a different serial killer, okay, which was a man in Slovakia by the name Matej Kurko, he was very respected and his word was taken very seriously. So officers in Switzerland reached out to officers in Toronto, and it would later come out that Bruce MacArthur was indeed John Jacob. In August of 2015, when men start going missing again from Church and Wellesley, police become very concerned. Okay. This part I have an issue with. I'm going to tell you why. Okay. It's when Andrew Kinsman goes missing that things change. Andrew did a lot of volunteer work and had a lot of social connections. So when he went missing, there were a lot of people demanding that this become a high priority case. So it did. Great. I'm very thankful for that. Oh my God, please don't get me wrong. I'm super thankful for that. But literally, the first thing that came to my mind was, why was he a high priority and the others weren't? Because you had a lot of pressure on you? Which, I mean, I guess we're going to probably circle back around to it, but which is another reason why MacArthur would always choose people from other immigrants, people that didn't have a lot of family. He would always try to pick people that he didn't think would be missed. As fucked up as that sounds, that he didn't think would be missed. And a couple of his victims, they were never even reported missing. If everybody else was made a high priority, maybe Andrew Kinsman wouldn't have to be made a high priority because maybe he would still be alive. But I digress. Police begin to gather all the video footage from around Kinsman's home. In August of 2016, police begin to review the footage. They notice a red Dodge Caravan that circles the block at least twice at the same time Andrew went missing. And this sticks out to police. Okay, so from there they go to the records department. And there are about 6,000 red Dodge Caravans registered to people in Toronto. Okay, police are lucky enough to be able to narrow down the search after they see that Andrew wrote the name Bruce on his calendar. So they go back and they check to see how many Bruces own red Dodge Caravans in Toronto. And there are 5. One of them being, you guessed it, Bruce MacArthur. Police recognize that name from past encounters with him and they begin to watch him. Then, when officers announce that there's a new task force created in an attempt to solve the missing person cases in Toronto, MacArthur decides to get rid of his Dodge Caravan. Luckily, police were able to find and seize the vehicle. Blood was found in the back of the car, and tests would come back as matching that of Andrew Kinsman. With this new evidence, police are able to obtain a warrant. So, MacArthur lived in a high-rise apartment with his son. Officers begin watching them and learning their schedules. They realize that there's an opportunity in the middle of the night to go to the apartment and copy MacArthur's computer. Okay, so They have officers as lookouts while the others go inside the home. They only had enough time to copy 45% of the computer before they were told by the lookouts to basically get out of the apartment, they're coming. But even that was more than enough information for the officers. They were able to obtain thousands of files, and while going through these files, they found that MacArthur had a file for every single one of his victims. The files would contain information about each of the victims. There would be pictures of his victims when they're alive, because remember, some of these victims he knew for years and years and years. So he would have all their information. So it'd be a file of, whoever, their information, pictures of them alive, and then there would even be some pictures of his victims post-mortem. That picture's available online, by the way, if you want it, if you're interested. As officers are going through these files, they realize that MacArthur was very careful to pick his victims to make sure that it would be that it would be people that he thought nobody would miss. And a couple of his victims were never reported, so we talked about that. Okay, so police continue following MacArthur. The only instructions that they were given was that he was not allowed to be behind any closed doors with anyone. So unless and until that happened, officers were ordered to stay quiet and basically observe from a distance, because they just wanted to get as much information as possible. January 18th, 2018, officers spot Bruce MacArthur walking into his apartment with a male at approximately 10 a.m. Figures, right? So the surveillance team calls to get the okay from the higher-ups to go in and arrest MacArthur. 18 minutes later, they're pounding on his door. MacArthur came to the door and he was placed under arrest for 2 counts of murder. When they walked into the bedroom, they saw a male tied to the bed and he had a hood over his head. Had they not arrested him when they did, police are very confident that this would have been victim number 9, especially because MacArthur had a file about this man on his computer. So it was just a matter of time. He would have been a goner. He would have been a goner if police didn't barge in. So now that they have MacArthur in custody, the only thing left to do is find the bodies. Because MacArthur was a landscaper that was used to digging holes and cultivating planters, officers searched the properties of his previous homes but came up empty. They needed to find these bodies, not only to close this case, but to give these families the closure that they deserved, right? Like, come on. Officers would keep coming up empty. That's until they searched the home of one of MacArthur's customers. It's an elderly couple that own this home, okay? So, this elderly couple owns this home, and they also have a summer home. So, during the summer months, they would be at their summer home, and this would leave MacArthur plenty of time to get rid of the bodies. This was also the place that he stored, like he had to deal with them to store, they let him store some of his landscaping tools on their property also. But then while they were gone on their summer, when they were at their summer home, he would dispose of his victims on their property. Okay. So remember, this is January in Toronto. So when they begin their search, it's very cold and most of the ground is everything's pretty much frozen. They start with cadaver dogs, and one of the dogs hits on a planter. So officers seize that planter along with 2 others. They bring the planters that are frozen solid back to their headquarters with them. They let them thaw out, and when they do, police get a whiff of the unmistakable smell of human decomposition. Officers would then return to the home and seize the rest of the planters. Every single planter on that couple's property contained victims. All but one that was found in the ravine behind the couple's home. Andrew Kinsman was found in a planter. He was identified because he had a titanium knee replacement that he had done, and by his fingerprints. And the majority of the victims were identified by DNA or dental records, and a few of them were identified by fingerprints. Besides the fact that he was planting these, like they were potted plants, he was planting them like they were potted fucking plants. He would also keep trophies of sorts that belonged to his victims. He kept their hair and or their belongings. In February of 2019, Bruce McArthur was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. He will be 91 years old when he's eligible for parole. So is it essentially a life sentence? Yes. Do I agree with this sentence? No, I don't. Not even a little bit. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I think they needed to send a very clear message and give him 8 life sentences. That's the very least that they could have done for these poor men. Not only were they targeted, but they were targeted because Bruce McArthur believed that nobody cared enough to report them. So, that's horrible. That is horrible. They were targeted because he thought nobody loved them or cared enough about them or would even notice that they were gone. Then you give him a life sentence, but you give him an eligibility for parole after 25 years? No. What? Are you kidding me?
Interviewarea.com. A basic life conviction in the United States.
Alexa, stop!
A minimum of 25 years before.
Alexa, stop! Wait, I don't even know where I left off. Okay, so not only were they targeted because Bruce McArthur believed that nobody would care enough to report them, but then you give him a sentence and you give him the eligibility of parole. It's bullshit. I think it's bullshit. He should not get parole. And maybe it sounds petty, but I just feel like it's another slap in their face. After all this, he's going to be eligible for parole. No. Let me tell you something. There's a chance that at 91 years old, he will be able to walk around and he may get a few years to taste the freedom if they let him out. Don't sleep on a 91-year-old because you know what? My grandmother's 92 and she could still drive to the food store by herself. She could still go to lunch on her own with her girlfriends. So don't go sleeping on a 91-year-old. There's a chance he could be 91. And if they let him out, then he'll what? He'll taste a few years of freedom? No. Bullshit. All right, guys. If you're still here, thank you. I appreciate you so very much. If you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. Really helps me out. I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.